Welcome back to another deep dive. Usually when you think about fixing a problem, there's this expectation of a really clean, clear cause and effect.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, think about a mechanic. The car is making some weird rattling sound. They pop the hood, point to a frayed fan belt, and just say, there's the issue. It's mechanical. It's visible. You replace the belt, the rattle stops.
Right. And I mean, it's a super comforting mental model. We are naturally wired to want problems to be obvious, to be easily isolated and completely fixable within a predictable time frame.
But then you step into the world of leading a school or, honestly, managing any kind of complex human organization, and suddenly that mechanic's toolbox is just utterly useless.
Yeah, completely obsolete.
You can't just pop the hood on a chaotic classroom or like an underperforming sales team and point to one frayed wire. We are looking at a leadership landscape that is deafening. There is so much operational noise, so many human variables, that finding the actual root cause of failure feels, well, impossible.
Which perfectly sets up the focus of our analysis today. We're looking at a true masterclass in cutting through all that noise.
Yes, we are.
So, on the table today, we have a transcript from the Impact of Educational Leadership talk show, specifically featuring Dr. Isaiah Drone III. And alongside his insights, we're analyzing two incredibly detailed educational anchor charts.
And these charts are essentially operational blueprints, right?
Exactly. They map out exactly how to observe, evaluate, and actually improve how people learn and teach.
And the mission for this deep dive for you listening right now is to uncover how leaders can actually escape the daily grind and use objective data, not just their gut feelings, to drive real improvement.
Right, because gut feelings only get you so far.
Exactly. And Dr. Drone III introduces a concept right out of the gate that I think hits a nerve for anyone in middle or upper management. He calls it the principal's paradox.
Oh, that's a great term.
It really is. It's this exhausting everyday reality of being everywhere at once, constantly putting out operational fires, navigating a relentless schedule, yet simultaneously feeling like your actual impact on the ultimate goal, which in this case is student outcomes, is just frustratingly diluted.
Yeah, that paradox is essentially the trap of motion versus progress. Dr. Drone III's core philosophy argues that true instructional leadership has absolutely nothing to do with the sheer volume of classrooms you visit, or like the number of staff meetings you hold. It is entirely about what he calls diagnostic specificity.
Okay, let's unpack that term, because diagnostic specificity sounds incredibly clinical.
It does sound a bit academic.
To escape this paradox, a leader clearly has to fundamentally change how they evaluate their team. So let's look at it through a different lens for a second. Operating without diagnostic data is basically like a restaurant manager running around bussing tables, fixing flickering light bulbs, and rushing the waitstaff while the food coming out of the kitchen is consistently burned.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. The manager's incredibly busy. They're sweating, but they aren't actually looking at the stoves to solve the core issue. So how does Dr. Drone III suggest leaders pivot away from frantic, subjective critiques and actually, get to the stoves?
Well, he introduces a real paradigm shift in how we deliver feedback, and he uses a really powerful metaphor for it. He states that a leader must give their teachers a mirror, not a window.
A mirror, not a window. Wow, that's a striking visual. But practically speaking, what is the difference in a high-stress environment?
Think about the psychological impact of standard feedback. Say a principal walks into a classroom, observes for 20 minutes, and later sits down with the teacher and says, I felt like the lesson lacked pace, and the students seemed disengaged.
Yeah, that's pretty typical.
Right, but that is a window. The leader is basically asking the teacher to look through the leader's own subjective, highly biased viewpoint.
And the immediate human reaction to that is just pure defensiveness. Because, pace means something totally different to a veteran teacher than it does to an administrator. The teacher just hears a personal attack on their professional style.
Precisely. The window relies on interpretation, which just invites argument. But when you justify your observation with hard, quantifiable data, you provide a mirror. You are simply holding up a reflection of reality.
So it's about removing the ego.
Exactly. If a leader says, based on the transcript of the lesson, 80% of the class time was spent on uninterrupted teacher lecturing, and only 3 of the 25 students spoke, well, that is an undeniable reflection. There's no I feel in that statement.
To even know what to look for in that mirror, though, a leader needs a baseline, right? I mean, they need to know what actually constitutes a healthy classroom versus a struggling one.
They do, and that is where Dr. Drone III's 5 core beliefs for scoping and sequencing instruction come in. They basically act as the frame for that mirror. First is focus, which means ruthlessly targeting the right academic skills rather than just, getting through a textbook.
Focus.
Second is teach, emphasizing high leverage practices over passive lecturing. Third is practice. And this one is fascinating because he notes that giving deliberate feedback is itself a high leverage practice that you actually have to schedule and rehearse.
Oh, wow. So feedback isn't just something you do on the fly.
Right. It's a deliberate practice.
Yeah.
Fourth is monitoring, which is the actual gathering of data to make those decisions. And fifth is growing, which is the non-negotiable commitment that every single student grows every single day.
Okay, so those 5 beliefs.
Yeah.
Focus, teach, practice, monitor, grow.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a really great theoretical mandate. But let's get into the mechanics of this.
Sure.
Once you establish that mirror, once you were in the room monitoring,
Right.
what specific practices are you actually looking for in the reflection? Like, what is the criteria for success?
Well, to define that success, Dr. Drone III relies on frameworks developed by researchers like Robert Marzano. For those outside of education, Marzano's work is essentially the gold standard of meta-analysis.
Right, he looked at tons of data.
Decades of studies, all to figure out what specific teaching strategies actually move the needle on student learning, totally regardless of the subject matter. So from that, Dr. Drone III categorizes 9 best practices into 3 distinct domains.
Okay, let's break those domains down because I really don't want us to just list them off like a textbook. What are we actually looking at here?
The first is the foundational domain. This includes skills like summarizing and note-taking, or identifying similarities and differences. It also includes reinforcing effort and providing recognition.
So really the cognitive building block.
Exactly. If a student's brain cannot summarize a basic paragraph, they cannot synthesize complex arguments later on.
That makes perfect sense. It's the bedrock. What's the second domain?
Domain 2 is instructional. This is where the actual delivery happens. It includes strategic homework and practice, cooperative learning, which is students working in structured groups, and a really crucial concept called non-linguistic representation.
I want to pause on non-linguistic representation for a second because that sounds like some very heavy academic jargon. What does that actually look like when a principal observes it?
It sounds complex, but it simply means forcing the brain to encode information visually or kinesthetically rather than just through words.
Okay, so not just talking at them.
Right. If a teacher is explaining fractions, they aren't just talking about numerators and denominators. They are having students draw visual models or physically manipulate blocks on their desk.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so by observing, if a teacher uses non-linguistic representation, a leader can see if they are bridging conceptual gaps for students who might struggle with traditional verbal instruction.
Which leads us to the final domain, which is engagement.
Yes, domain 3. This one includes setting clear objectives, generating and testing hypotheses, and using specific cues and advanced organizers to kind of prime the students' brains for what's coming next.
Here is where I see a potential roadblock, though.
Okay, what's that?
Let's say a principal is doing everything right. They walk in, they hold up the data-driven mirror, and they notice a glaring failure in that third domain. Engagement is totally flat. The students aren't testing hypotheses, they're staring out the window.
A very common scenario.
Right. So how does a leader actually fix that without falling back into the subjective window and just saying, you need to engage them better?
Yes.
Like if a student gets a math problem wrong, marking a giant red X on the paper doesn't teach them math. You have to know if they missed a step in the formula or if they fundamentally don't understand the concept of multiplication at all.
And that math analogy gets to the very heart of Dr. Drone III's philosophy. This is the exact definition of diagnostic specificity. When instruction fails, the leader cannot just diagnose failure or boredom.
They need more detail.
They must pinpoint the exact anatomical level of the error occurring in the classroom. And he categorizes these errors into 3 distinct types: procedural, conceptual, or computational.
Let's apply those to a real scenario. Say a teacher's lesson completely derails. How does a leader distinguish between those 3 errors?
Well, a procedural error means the steps or the system failed. For example, the teacher doesn't have a routine for transitioning from a lecture to a group activity.
Ah, okay.
So it takes 10 chaotic minutes of moving desks and handing out papers, and the entire pace of the lesson is just destroyed. The teacher understands the material, but the procedure is flawed.
So if the principal diagnoses a procedural error, they don't send the teacher to some 2-day workshop on the philosophy of collaborative learning. They just help them design a 3-minute transition routine. It's a highly localized fix.
Exactly the point. Now, compare that to a conceptual error. This means the teacher or the students misunderstand the underlying idea itself.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure, if a teacher is trying to teach the causes of the Civil War, but is only listing dates and battles without connecting them to economics and slavery, that is a conceptual failure. No amount of efficient classroom management will fix that.
Right, because the core idea is missing. And the third error type, computational.
Computational means the concept is understood and the procedure is in place, but the real-time execution was flawed.
Like a slip-up.
Yeah, a teacher might have a great lesson plan on paper, but they simply miscalculated how long a specific activity would take, or they accidentally skipped a key slide in their presentation. It's just an isolated execution error.
Pinpointing the exact error type like that completely shifts the dynamic. It stops the leader from prescribing medication for illness the teacher doesn't actually have.
It really elevates instructional feedback to a true high-leverage move, but as you pointed out earlier, having the specific data doesn't automatically make a leader good at delivering it.
Right, there is still a human being on the receiving end of this critique. Which brings us to the execution phase. How does the leader communicate a procedural or conceptual error without just totally demoralizing the staff?
So Dr. Drone III provides a framework for this called the principles lens. It is a 4-step logical sequence designed to keep the leader laser-focused on growth rather than criticism.
Okay, what's step one?
Step 1 is simply identify the high-leverage issue. You explicitly name the specific noise or chaos you observed, whether it's an instructional gap or a cultural problem.
So you isolate the signal from the noise. You don't bring up the messy bulletin board if the core issue is a conceptual failure in the math lesson.
Keep the main thing the main thing. Then step 2 is justify with data. You explicitly cite the documentation, the observation transcripts, or the student exit tickets to support your diagnostic specificity. This is presenting the mirror.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though.
Go for it.
Let's say I'm a veteran teacher of 20 years. I know my craft. If a principal walks into my room, immediately identifies an error, and slaps down a transcript of my lesson to prove I'm wrong, I'm still going to feel ambushed.
Oh, for sure.
It feels incredibly rigid. Doesn't this heavy reliance on data risk alienating experienced professionals who feel like they're being micromanaged by a spreadsheet?
That is a very real risk, but only if a leader stops at step 2. And that is exactly why step 3 is the linchpin of the entire philosophy.
Okay, what is step 3?
Step 3 is propose a high-leverage action step. Crucially, Dr. Drone III defines this as a collaborative action. It's not a mandate. It could be offering to model the correct practice for the teacher, sitting down to co-plan a future lesson together, or engaging in a joint data inquiry.
I see the distinction now. If the leader just says, here's the data proving you failed, fix it, that's a dictatorship.
Right.
But if the leader says, here's the data showing a procedural breakdown, let's co-plan tomorrow's transition together, that creates a partnership. You're getting into the trenches with them.
It completely disarms the defensiveness because the leader is taking on a share of the responsibility. It builds deep trust. And that trust makes step 4 possible, which is reflective questioning.
Reflective questioning.
Yes. Rather than lecturing the teacher on the pedagogy they missed, the leader uses targeted questions to prompt the teacher's own self-reflection.
It's basically the Socratic method. You guide them to see the reflection in the mirror themselves, rather than just narrating the reflection to them.
Exactly. When a teacher arrives at the conclusion themselves, the likelihood of them actually changing their behavior skyrockets. But, to make this 4-step sequence a reality, leaders have to document their observations with incredible precision. They can't just walk around with a blank legal pad, jotting down smiley faces and question marks.
Which is where those 2 visual anchor charts we mentioned at the top become so vital. Looking at these charts, I actually felt a profound sense of relief on behalf of managers everywhere.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Because they take the abstract art of good leadership and map it to a really concrete taxonomy of note-taking. They connect the how of teaching directly to the what of leadership.
They do. They provide the necessary operational structure. The charts link the how, which are foundational strategies like the gradual release model.
That's the classic I do, we do, you do approach, right?
Right. The teacher models the skill, the class practices it together, and then the student executes it independently.
So the charts link that specific classroom strategy directly to the macro leadership goals. The what, which is the leader's ultimate responsibility, routinely monitoring instruction, facilitating a rigorous curriculum, and driving college and career readiness.
Exactly.
It shows that ensuring a teacher does the we-do part of a lesson isn't just micromanagement. It's the specific mechanism that guarantees the rigor of the whole curriculum.
And Dr. Drone III operationalizes this further by categorizing 3 specific leadership writing styles for documentation. The anchor charts map perfectly to these styles, teaching leaders exactly how to write down what they see.
Okay, let's go through those. What's the first style?
The first style is descriptive writing. This is pure data capture, just the facts. For example, the transcript shows the teacher asked 14 closed-ended questions and 0 open-ended questions.
So no judgment at all, no interpretation.
None. On the anchor charts, this descriptive style is linked directly to documenting procedures, checking for understanding, and observing the raw lesson cycle. The challenge is that most leaders really want to skip this step. They want to jump immediately to interpretation.
Because it's human nature to want to diagnose immediately.
But without the descriptive data, you don't have a mirror. Once you have the descriptive facts, you move to the second style, which is analytical writing. This is where you explain the impact of the data.
How does that look in practice?
For instance, the exclusive use of closed-ended questions prevents students from testing hypotheses, which directly contributes to the lack of engagement noted in the lesson.
Oh, so you are connecting the dots between the raw facts and the Marzano domains we discussed earlier.
Yes. The anchor charts link this analytical style to error analysis, looking for behavioral trends and uncovering the root cause of why a specific standard wasn't met.
Yeah, and the third style?
Finally, the third style is reflective writing. This focuses on the systemic response. It details the standard recommendations, the proposed action steps, and how the leader and teacher will actually monitor progress moving forward.
I noticed the anchor charts naturally integrate some of the heavier operational frameworks here too, like MTSS, the multi-tiered system of supports.
Yes, they do.
For those unfamiliar with that, MTSS is essentially an educational triage system. It categorizes interventions into different tiers based on how intensely a student is struggling.
And the charts show that reflective writing is the perfect place to utilize those systems. If your analytical writing reveals a conceptual error for a specific group of students, while your reflective writing might propose an MTSS Tier 2 intervention during the guided practice portion of the next lesson.
It's all connected.
It is. You are also using this reflective documentation to guide PLC's professional learning communities, where teachers review data together to rewrite unit plans.
It creates a completely closed loop. You look at the descriptive data of the small group instruction, you analytically identify if the error is conceptual or procedural, and then you reflectively propose an intervention like co-planning or an MTSS strategy.
It's brilliant.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Whether you are a principal running a high school, an executive managing a regional sales team, or simply an individual trying to evaluate your own personal habits, it means that structure and diagnostic specificity are your absolute best defenses against the chaos of the daily grind.
If we step back and really look at the bigger picture, Dr. Drone III's framework completely demystifies what it means to lead effectively. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room or possessing some innate charismatic intuition. It means stepping out of the operational fire drills to offer a data-driven mirror. By diagnosing specific anatomical errors, procedural, conceptual, or computational, and following a logical 4-step sequence, you remove the personal friction and defensiveness from feedback.
You identify the issue, justify it with data, propose a collaborative action step, and use reflective questioning to guide the realization.
And you document it all methodically using descriptive, analytical, and reflective writing. When you stop treating the symptoms based on your subjective window and start solving the actual root causes shown in the data mirror, you create a universal blueprint for accelerated, sustainable growth.
It has been a deeply clarifying analysis. We started with the exhausting noise of the principal's paradox, and we've walked through a hyper-specific, data-driven framework that empowers both the leader providing the feedback and the professional receiving it.
It really is a game changer.
But as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Oh, I'm ready.
We began by talking about the mechanic, popping the hood to fix a broken part. And we spent our time discussing how leaders can hold up a perfect, objective mirror to show a teacher exactly where their execution is failing.
True.
But if a leader's data provides a truly perfect mirror of performance, are we prepared for the reality of what else that mirror might reflect?
That's a heavy question.
What happens when the precise diagnostic data shows that the conceptual error isn't the teacher's fault at all, but rather a fundamental failure in the design of the curriculum itself. Or maybe the state standards themselves are flawed. When the irrefutable data points upward, to the system rather than the employee, how willing are leaders to look in their own mirror?
That is the ultimate test of objective leadership.
Something to think about as you navigate your own leadership challenges. Until next time, keep analyzing the data and keep asking the hard questions.